안녕하세요 여러분. I'm sorry I couldn't upload this video yesterday because I was very sick. I am not 100% better yet, but I could not miss this week's episode because I will be talking about something so important, and you guys probably realize what it is from the title of the video, so I am just gonna go straight into it because there's just so much to talk about. So, direct modifying. Before I go into what it actually is, let's just go back all the way to sentence formation in Korean and just remember that in order to have a regular sentence, we need a subject and a verb, right? And the verbs in Korean usually go at the end, they're conjugated, and that's just how Korean sentence structure works. And in Korean, adjectives can have verb-like qualities, so they can be conjugated and put at the end of the sentence just like verbs. But what if I would tell you that you can have a verb that doesn't act as a verb in a sentence, or an adjective that actually acts as an adjective and doesn't have verb-like qualities in a sentence with another verb or another adjective? That's exactly what we're going to be looking at today, and that's pretty much what direct modifying really is. We're going to be looking at adjectives, or how they're sometimes called descriptive verbs, and active verbs that can also directly modify nouns. So in English, adjectives are simple. They describe nouns. But in Korean, adjectives can act like verbs. And we can say things like 그 여자가 예뻐요. That girl is pretty. You can say pretty girl in Korean as well. This is when the word pretty in Korean, 예쁘다, it loses its verb-like qualities, and we can turn it into a full-blown adjective, just like that. And all we need to do is add one letter to the bottom of the last syllable, turning it into 예쁜. And you can do that with pretty much any adjective in Korean, whether they have a 받침, whether they don't, whether they end on 하다, whether they end on a 비읍 or 리을, with everything. So when you have adjectives that don't have a 받침, you just add 니은, like in 예쁘다, 예쁜, 싸다, 산, cheap, 비싸다, 비싼, expensive, 크다, 큰, 빠르다, 빠른. See the correlation? I'm just gonna quickly go through all the possible ways you can change these adjectives to directly modify nouns. Because for example, when you have an adjective with a 받침, instead of just 니은, you need to add 은. For example, 좋다 turns into 좋은. 작다 turns into 작은. 많다 turns into 많은. And you can use these adjectives to describe anything. 싼 음식을 좋아해요. I like cheap food. 큰 배를 원해요. I want a big boat. With adjectives that end on 하다, it's pretty much the same as with adjectives that don't have a 받침. You just add a 니은 and that's it. So 조용하다 turns into 조용한. So a guy can say 착한 여자친구 필요해요. I need a nice girlfriend. You know, makes sense. Then there are adjectives that end on 비읍, and all of them have a similar pattern where you just get rid of the 비읍 and you add not So 춥다 turns into 추운, or 쉽다 turns into 쉬운, 뜨겁다 turns into 뜨거운, and 맵다 turns into 매운. Next we can have adjectives whose stem ends on a 릴, and those also are a little bit irregular, and we just get rid of the 릴 and add a 니은. That's it. We just substitute those two. So with adjectives like 달다, to be sweet, it turns into 탄, or 길다 turns into 긴, long, to be long. 긴 머리 있어요. Yeah? I have long hair. Lastly, there are verbs who end on 있다 or 없다. We just add 는 to it, and that's pretty much it. So if you have an adjective 재미있다, it turns into 재미있는. Or 맛없다, 맛없는. Okay? Or 맛있다, 맛있는. So these are descriptive verbs or adjectives, where we can use them in a sentence where they will be describing a noun. So all I want you guys to remember from this is that when it comes to adjectives, they can have verb-like qualities and they can be conjugated and put at the end of the sentence, but they can also serve as an adjective with its purpose of describing or directly modifying a noun. That's pretty much it. I will put a lot more examples in the blog post, so make sure to check that out. And now we are going to be moving on to action verbs. And this is when things get tricky, because with adjectives, it's quite easy to switch your mind around and think that, okay, they can serve as regular adjectives when they describe nouns. But what if I would tell you that so can action verbs in Korean? They can actually be used to describe nouns, to directly modify nouns in a sentence. right? But don't worry, we do that in English too, but just in a little bit of a different way. So, I'm going to have Korean from Zero Book 2 help me today because boy would I struggle in trying to explain this to you guys if I didn't have this. Alright, let's say we have 2 sentences in English. I watched a movie yesterday. It was interesting. Makes sense, right? But we can put them together and have a sentence that says, the movie that I watched was interesting. In English, to directly modify, we use that. In Korean, we can use verbs to do the same thing. So with adjectives, it was simple. They can't have a future tense, a past tense, they're always in present tense because when you're describing something, you can't say was pretty woman, prettied woman, prettying woman. It just doesn't make sense, right? You just say pretty woman, nice flower, long hair, you know? Pretty, long, nice, they have no tense. But when it comes to action verbs that are directly modifying a noun, those can have a future, a past, a present tense. Going back to our sentence about movies. In English, we can say, the movie that I watched was interesting. The movie that I'm watching is interesting. The movie that I will watch is interesting. In Korean, if we're directly translating the same sentence from Korean, it would sound something like, the watched movie is interesting. Or the am watching movie is interesting. Or the will-watched movie, the will-be-watched movie is interesting. Do you know what I mean? It's the movie that has been watched, or the movie that will be watched. That's kind of the general meaning of action verbs that are directly modifying. So let's go with examples. I think that's gonna be the easiest way. In future tense, when we're trying to say something, like I will go or I will eat, we say 갈 거예요, 먹을 거예요. So if we want to directly modify in the future, we just get rid of 거예요. That's it. And we're left with 갈, 먹을, 할. And the sentences that you can form range from 오늘 먹을 음식은 불고기예요. The food that I will eat today is 불고기. 오늘 먹을, directly modified in the future. 음식은, in this case, 은 is the subject marking particle, yeah? 불고기예요 is 불고기. 제가 갈 도시는 커요. The city that I will go to is big. 갈 도시는. City that I will go to. Present tense is quite simple as well. When we have words like 가다, 먹다, 하다, we just get rid of the da and we add 는. And in this case, it doesn't matter whether the word has a 받침 or doesn't have a 받침, it's always 는. 하는, 가는, 먹는, 읽는, 공부하는, it's always like that. It's always 는. Because in past tense, it's going to be 한, 간, or 먹은. If I want to say the food that I'm eating right now, I can say 제가 먹는 음식은 짜요. The food that I'm eating is salty. Or 제가 가는 도시는 커요. The city that I'm going to right now is big. When it comes to present tense, there's a little tiny translation difficulty that you should be aware of, and that is when you have a sentence that can be translated in multiple ways. For example, if you're saying 제가 먹는 음식은 비싸요. This sentence can be translated in 2 different ways. The food that I'm eating right now is expensive, or the food that I eat in general is expensive. Like habitually, I just eat expensive food. So how on earth would we differentiate between these 2 meanings, and how can we convey this meaning to whoever we're talking to? There are a couple of ways you can do that, and first one is you add words that can clarify the time frame. For example, if you want to say that the food that I'm eating right now is expensive, you can just say 제가 지금 먹는 음식은 비싸요. The food that I'm eating right now, 지금, is expensive. Or, well, if you want to brag about how the food you always eat is expensive, you can just use words like 항상, always. 제가 항상 먹는 음식은 비싸요. Or you can use 보통, which is normally. Another way you can clarify what you're trying to say is if you use the 고 있다. It describes the continuity of your action. So you can say 제가 먹고 있는 음식은 비싸요. The food that I am eating right now is expensive. Choose whichever way you want to make yourself clear and use it. Now let's go to the past tense examples. Past tense, like I said, is very simple. You just add 는 or 은 and that's about it. 먹은, 한, 간. If you notice that in English, when we say the food that I ate yesterday was salty, we use past tense throughout the entire sentence. So we say the food that I ate in past tense, was also past tense, salty. So the same thing in Korean. When you want to say 제가 먹은 음식은 짰어요. Or 제가 간 도시는 컸어요. I will put more examples in the blog post, so don't worry if you're getting a little bit confused, but hopefully that is making sense to you so far. And just to kind of sum it all up, with words when you have a 받침, like 먹다, in the future you would say 먹을 음식. In the present, you can say 먹고 있는, or you can say 먹는, you add 는. And in the past tense, you just say 먹은. When you have a verb that doesn't have a 받침, it's even simpler. 가다, to go. 갈, in the future, I will go. 갈 도시, the city I will go to. In the present tense, it is 가는 도시. In the past tense, it's 간 도시. Please don't get confused with the past tense, directly modifying active verbs and adjectives, because it can be similar, like 예쁜 or 간. They're not the same, because adjectives can't have a past or future tense. So that one piece of information should keep you from confusing them. It might happen, but don't worry about it too much. When we're talking about directly modifying adjectives, there were a couple of cases that were irregular, like the adjectives that end on a bilb or a riul or things like that. There are also similar irregular verbs when it comes to action verbs, and I'm not gonna go over them today because there's just so many of those irregular verbs, and you don't necessarily need to get hung up on them because your vocabulary is going to expand as you're learning the language. You know, as you get comfortable with it, you start hearing a certain word more often and it kind of stays with you. So don't worry about it too much. There are plenty of resources online that show you tables of irregular verbs, and you can look at them, but just don't get stuck. Don't try to memorize all of the irregular verbs. Really, it's just going to come to you. I'm pretty sure I've forgotten to mention something along the way, and if I did, I will definitely mention it in the blog post, so make sure to check it out. I really need to get used to saying the blog post because I just not naturally want to say, oh, check the description box, but I don't write in the description box anymore. I have a website. Yay! On this bright note, I want to conclude this episode, and I hope this was helpful. I hope I didn't confuse you guys too much. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section here, on my website, anywhere. I'll try to answer them. As for the website, it's still kind of under construction as well, so thank you so much for all of you who are sending me messages through the contact me area on my website. I've received them all. I'm so thankful for all your support and all your questions. I'm still trying to figure out how I can answer them though. Sorry, I really should have thought that through. But yeah, I hope you guys just don't get offended if I don't answer you for a while because I'm still in the process of figuring it all out. Alright, I hope you guys all have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your learning, have fun, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye! 안녕!